Welcome to Motivate You, the Winner Circle, here with your host, June Archer. Today, my guest is an award-winning, best-selling author of over 50 titles. Today, we're going to talk about her new release, Beauty Mark, a verse novel of Marilyn Monroe and Respect, a book about none other than the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin. Please welcome to the show, Miss Carole Boston Weatherford. Carole, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. And hello to everybody from North Carolina.
I am so excited to speak to you. I had the pleasure of reading through some of your things and over 50 titles. I want to ask you how and who inspired you to become a writer?
Okay, I think I always was a writer, but my parents encouraged me. I made up my first poem when I was in first grade. And by the time I was in second or third grade, my dad, who was a high school printing teacher, had printed some of my poems on little index cards in his print shop at Douglas High School in Baltimore. So I saw my work in print at a very early age before there was any such thing as a desktop computer, a laptop, or a laser printer. And so I just kind of took it for granted. It was it was a hobby that eventually became a career. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I decided that I wanted to, be a writer professionally, and I pursued that goal for about 14 years before I was had my first book published. I had some poems published in literary magazines, but didn't have my first book published until I was almost 40.
Now, I am nowhere near you. I have two books published. One is a children's book. Uh, 50 over 50 books, Carole. How can we inspire our young people to write? Because I was told that we all have a book in us. But what is the best way that we can inspire our young people, our young readers, to become writers and publish a book?
Well, I think that I'm not sure we all have a book in us, but we do all have a story in us. We all have a story to tell. And I think one way that we can encourage our young people to write is by, first of all, listening to them, because young people always have something to tell us. When I go to schools and I open up the question and answer session, I have to do so, particularly with the younger kids, by saying, and a question is something that you want me to tell you, something you want to find out. It might start with who, what, where, why, how, when, that kind of thing. Because otherwise, they're going to raise their hand and they're going to tell me a story about them. So young people have no shortage of stories, but most people don't like to write. But I think one way that we, particularly in the African American culture, can encourage kids to write is by sharing some of our stories with them and asking them to write them down. Because otherwise, those stories, are lost. So, I mean, that's, one way to validate kids' writing, to show them that our stories, our collective stories, are important, and also to give them some validation and some encouragement by recognizing them once they do commit whatever you tell them to paper. So, if a child draws, for instance, you can put the picture on the refrigerator, or you can frame the picture. If they tell a story, you can do the same thing. You can put it, or you can share it with other people. Let them see you sharing what they've written with other people. If that means making additional copies and sending one to grandma. But children need and deserve opportunities to demonstrate excellence. And they don't always get those opportunities in school because of just the sheer numbers. It's hard for a teacher to really give every child in the classroom their due. But we as parents or grandparents or just adults in the lives of the children around us can give children opportunities to demonstrate excellence, and writing is one way that they can do that.
How excited are you that we are now seeing a movement? You have been doing this for years, but we are now seeing a movement in the educational system, in our local libraries, to make sure that the diversity piece is now invested into our libraries and our collections, from having not just Black authors, but people of color, so that our children, Black, white, Hispanic, and polka dot, can see that there is such a diversity of authors and writers and people who create characters and and just making sure that our young people see that, hey, there are more than just one type of individuals in these stories.
Right. I think it's very important. Of course, I didn't have that when I was a kid because it, in large part did not exist. There were few writers of color whose work I was exposed to. The ones that impacted me the most were probably Langston Hughes and Gordon Parks. When I read Gordon Parks' Learning Tree, I can remember when I was in middle school probably, and the movie was out at the same time, and that just really moved me. But it's important for kids to see themselves in books because children have to see it before they can be it.
Mm.
Also important that kids see enough of themselves in books that they are motivated to pick up books over and over and over again and read a lot, because not every kid is going to be privileged enough to travel far and wide. But if a child reads books, a child can see the world, experience the world through books, and learn about things that they may never, come face to face with. For example, my son was interested in sharks, and this is not a diverse books issue, but he was interested in, well, other than going to the National Aquarium, which was 300, 400 miles away, there was no way he was going to see a shark or he could see them on TV, but to read about them, books can expose kids to so much more than they can experience in their, everyday world, in real life. So it's important that the books that they're exposed to also, expose them to people who look like them and also to people who don't look like them, so that they can see that, although, we may eat different things at the dinner table, we might even speak different languages, but there are some universal themes that, all people want to be loved. There are some universal themes, and we're more alike than we are different. And the differences are to be not to be feared, but to be celebrated and respected.
And you've never seen, starting out, you said you didn't see the example. So no authors, writers, no illustrators. How hard was it for you to be inspired to continue to follow your dream and your passion about being a writer?
Well, I was originally writing for adults, and so by the time I was doing that in my 20s, I had read some adult authors of color. I started writing poetry during the Black Arts Movement, and read poets like Nikki Giovanni and Hakeem Abudi. There were, I did have role models, and seeing those people read their poetry at poetry readings, one showed me that, I look like them, and, maybe I can do this. And two, poetry is meant to be performed. And so, when I heard them reading their work, then I began to look for opportunities in my community. And there were not as many spoken word venues at that time, but I found opportunities to share my work in public. So I did have, some role models, even though I didn't have them necessarily in children's books when I was growing up. But I was fortunate to have been born, at the time that I was born. And then by the time I had kids myself, there were more books, more diverse books for my kids. And like I said, I was writing for adults at the time. It decided to switch up and attempt to write for children, since there seemed to be more diverse books being published for kids. And I thought, so maybe I can do this. And of course, yeah, I did. I did, and I could.
Is
And
there is there a piece of poetry that you've read throughout the years that you could share with us, whether you could recite it or even give us the author that inspired you just along your journey, just period, not as an author, but
I
just.
can't look. You're. I don't have it memorized, so I'm not even going to try. But I will tell you that I was very fortunate to have gone to an all-Black elementary school in Baltimore, Maryland, and at that school and in my home, I was exposed to the poetry of Langston Hughes, and I can remember having to memorize his poem, "I Too." I probably wasn't thrilled to memorize it at the time, but but it did. But I could connect with it because at the time that I was in fourth grade, it was probably around 1966 or so. So it was, right during the civil rights movement, and so I connected with that particular poem. And I continued throughout middle school to connect with the poetry of Harlem Renaissance poets like Countee Cullen. There's a poem that he wrote called Incident that impacted me quite a bit. And it was because it was set in Baltimore. It was about a black boy who was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and he went to Baltimore for the summer. And he was called the N-word by a white boy who was around the same age. And the poem included, like, of all the things that happened that summer, that's all that he remembered.
Mm.
Us remember, if the farther we have to go back into our childhood, the more likely the things that we remember are going to be bad things, like when I fell down and skinned my knee, or something like that.
Right.
So, yeah, so that poem impacted me quite a bit because I ended up writing a paper about Countee Cullen for that class, 8th grade English class. And when the teacher handed back the paper, there was only one thing written on the paper, well, two things written on the paper: the letter B for my grade and a question: did you write this? So I
Mm.
didn't realize at the time that that was his way of accusing me of plagiarism. But he could not, he couldn't find anything wrong with my paper at all. No, no red marks in the margins, nothing. But he could not, it was a white teacher, he could not bring himself to understand that even though I was African American, even though I had come to that private school from a public school, I still was smart, and I was articulate, and I could write. But so he gave me the grade that he expected me to be capable of rather than the grade that I had earned on that paper. So that is forever, that paper is forever tied to that poem by Countee Cullen entitled, for me, entitled Incident. That was the teacher's way of that. The B may as well have been an N, okay, on that paper.
Wow. I'm gonna have to go back and I want to read that book. For you, seeing that we've been in COVID quarantine, uh, away from the world and away from our daily routine, how has your process of writing changed or grown exponentially?
Okay, now you're breaking up just a little bit, but I think you asked me a question about COVID-19, how I'm dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, and maybe some of the social upheaval that's happening right now as well. Okay,
And how
all
you've been
right.
able
So
to and how you've been able
how
to
have I been
create.
able to how have I been able to continue to create in that
Yes, ma'am.
environment? Okay, all right. So I was I was, of course, deeply moved by the George Floyd, because I am uh, an African American mother, and when he was on that ground dying, and he called his mother's name, he called my name. I called all mothers at that point. Said, "Look, we're all your children." So I was deeply moved by that. Um, at the same time, that was early on in our COVID journey. So I was just getting out of the mode that a lot of us were in when it first started. That it scared the bejesus out of us. We were scared to touch anything, and
Mhm.
we were scared to death. But I have found space within that to continue to write. And whenever I've gone through tough times, writing has always been my refuge. So I can turn to my writing the same way I can turn to prayer. And I'm not necessarily working through the COVID issue in my writing, but because I'm able to escape into my writing the way some people can escape into a book, it has been, it's therapeutic for me. And like I said, it's my salvation when I'm going through a tough time.
Now I want to talk about this new book, Beauty Mark. What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, the inspiration behind Beauty Mark was my day job. The fact that, let me show you the book cover. This is Beauty Mark. The inspiration was my day job as a college professor at Fayetteville State University. And in that job, I encounter, lots of young people. And I had young adults in my home, and, teenagers in my home as well. And I noticed that young people were wearing, lots of Marilyn Monroe apparel. They had the Monroe piercings, right here, and some of them had Marilyn tattoos. And I teach at HBCU, so this is, these are not some of the kids are white kids, but it's
Right.
predominantly black. So I thought about the fact, well, what this generation is still, they're rocking this Marilyn Monroe apparel at the same time that the Me Too movement was rocking Hollywood. So, which, was kind
Mhm.
of ironic because Marilyn Monroe she not only suffered exploitation in Hollywood, she was a victim of child sex abuse as well. So she could have really been, the poster girl for the Me Too movement. And so I wanted to look into, what is her enduring appeal, and who was she really? I mean, because to a lot of people, she's a lot of us now. She's just a face. She's just a body and a face of someone who died over 50 years ago. She died in 1962. But as I looked deeper into her life, I found that she was a lot more complicated than her dumb blonde persona that she was typecast as. And she was a book collector. She was a poet. She was a gardener. She was an artist. And she was also the brains behind her brand. Marilyn Monroe was really her own creation. And it was just, an alter ego like Beyonce had Sasha Fierce. We don't know what, that's the Beyonce on stage, Sasha Fierce.
Right.
We don't know what
Right.
Beyonce is like around, around her house. But Marilyn Monroe had that same kind of thing going, these two, the real person, and then the stage persona or the alter ego. I also found out that Marilyn Monroe was politically aware. She was, woke before woke was even a term that had anything to do with politics. She was an ally uh, when it counted. She was friends with people like Sammy Davis Jr., Dorothy Dandridge. She supported the civil rights movement. She had ties to people who were organizers of the Communist Party. And FBI had a file on her. So now view the file. It's been made public, but they labeled her as leftist. And at one time, she had the occasion to help out Ella Fitzgerald, whom she idolized. She idolized Ella Fitzgerald because one of her vocal coach said to prepare for the singing role in this musical, movie musical, you need to get Ella Fitzgerald's Gershwin recordings and listen to them 100 times. And she did. She believed in self-improvement, so she was always studying, always trying to make herself better. And she listened to these recordings, and of course, she did not think that her voice compared to Ella's voice. But when Ella came to Los Angeles and wanted to play the Macambo, which was an exclusive nightclub, the owner said no, because not only was Ella Fitzgerald black, she was overweight, and she was a jazz singer rather than, a pop singer. So he said no. Well, Marilyn Monroe went to the club's owner and said, if you will let her play, I will let her perform there. I will sit in the front row every night in the engagement. And she did. And
Wow.
after that, playing to a packed house, Ella Fitzgerald never played small clubs again. That boosted her career to more lucrative venues. So,
Wow.
that was something that, a lot of people, don't stick their neck out like that. But
No, they don't. They don't.
Marilyn
Because
knew.
they're afraid of the backlash. They're afraid of losing their audience. So that was very commendable on her part.
Right, right. I'm still having a hard time hearing you breaking up. But yeah, it really took, I think, a lot of courage for her to do that. And they weren't girlfriends or anything, because Ella didn't like the drug Marilyn Monroe's drug use. But they respected each other, and Marilyn did help. She advocated for Ella in that way.
Now, tell us a little bit about the Aretha Franklin piece, because she is one of my
Yeah.
favorite singers. What was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. Now, Aretha Franklin, I grew up on her music because I'm a child of the '60s, and my dad was a big Aretha Franklin fan. I've got some of his albums right here. So he had
Wow.
lots of Aretha Franklin albums, all the vinyl, Aretha Now. These were all my dad's Aretha Franklin albums, and I had 45s. So he had lots of Aretha Franklin albums. So I grew up listening to her music, both in my dad's basement and on the radio. And when she passed away, a few people prodded me to write her biography. And after giving it some thought, I decided to give it a shot. And so this is Respect, Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. And the way I wrote this one, I think it's interesting to me, because I decided that I wanted to make it, rather than making it a straight biography, I wanted to make it a riff on her life, using a structure kind of like the song Respect. So each page starts out with a word that describes some aspect of her life. So the first page reads Blessed, cradled by the church, rocked by an ebony sea. Aretha says a little prayer each night on bended knee. The book is illustrated by Frank Morrison, and it's our third collaboration, and he did a fantastic job. This book just won the silver medal from the Society of Illustrators Original Art Show. That's a show that is of illustrations, of children's book illustrations, that is held each year in New York. And it'll probably
Wow.
be virtual this year. So yeah, this is Frank's work. And it's just it was fun to write. And the way I see this working, when parents read it to kids, I see them, or teachers being able to kind of hone in on the word. There's the word proud, it's probably backwards, Proud. Kids can spell the word even if they don't know what the word is. And then afterwards, teachers can go over those words with the kids and say, well, what does that mean? And when was the time when you felt proud? Or when was the time you showed respect, or felt like you were respected? So I think there are a lot of, beyond just being a biography, it's a book that lifts up the values and the character traits, and just the kind of values that she grew up around, about her upbringing.
Now, where can we find these two books, and where can we follow you so we can continue to support what you're doing?
They're at bookstores everywhere. You can purchase them online through the African American Book Club, the African American Literature Book Club, Amazon, IndieBound. You can order them from your favorite independent bookstore through IndieBound, so you can get them anywhere.
I love it. I know I'm going to try to get me a copy ASAP, but you heard it. Carole Boston Weatherford, new books out right now. Beauty Mark and Respect, award-winning, 50+ books. Make sure you pick up something from this amazing young lady. Carole, thank you so much for your time. The continued blessings sent to you, and I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you as soon as we come out of this COVID situation. We'll be getting together so I can get some tidbits on trying to work on my next book.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is June Archer for Motivate You, the Winner Circle. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be nice to somebody. Tell somebody you love them, and perform a random act of kindness. It comes back 100-fold, I promise you. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you.